August 1978. Two armed robberies, 15 miles apart, 30 minutes between them. Same rifle, same red mustache, same calm voice. Witnesses in both towns swear on their lives. Same man. Detectives drive the route in 47 minutes, flooring their Holden the entire way. The math collapses into impossibility. One human body cannot occupy 2 points that are far apart in half an hour. Not on these winding coastal roads. Not at any speed. At the second scene, the shaken cashier repeats the robber's parting words.
Sorry I'm late, but I just held up the Dramana branch.
For 23 months, Victoria police chase a phantom who leaves fingerprints but no face they can pin down. Operation Rimfire burns through 50 officers staking out betting shops every evening. Every lineup fails. Every sketch looks identical. Then, Detective Breer finds a photograph during a raid. Two men at a restaurant table, mirror images down to their matching ginger mustaches. The After Dark bandit doesn't exist. There are two of them. Identical twins weaponizing their own genetics. Two bodies sharing one face. A loophole no witness testimony could penetrate. The same bond that made them untouchable would guarantee their destruction. Because the moment one brother was captured, that identical face became a warrant for the other. And it took Peter less than 12 seconds to destroy his twin after a pact that was supposed to last 12 hours. How did two suburban carpenters become Australia's most wanted men? And why did the partnership that made them invincible also make their downfall inevitable? Crime was the Morgan family trade, passed down like a carpentry technique or a recipe for Christmas pudding. Kay Morgan, the twins' father, robbed banks and post offices across rural Victoria throughout the early 1960s. He brought Peter and Doug along as lookouts when they were barely 10 years old, posting them outside back doors while he wheeled safes into the night. The boys learned to watch for headlights, to stay silent, to run when told. Kay drilled one rule into his sons with the patience of a man teaching scripture.
Whatever you need to do to get ahead in life is acceptable, so long as no one gets hurt.
The boys memorized it. They believed it. They would one day test its limits. They tried legitimacy first. By 1977, Peter and Doug were 23-year-old carpenters hammering frames for a builder in Melbourne's outer suburbs. The pay arrived when the builder felt like writing checks, which was rare. The hours were long. The resentment simmered. Peter hated depending on someone else's signature for his rent, his groceries, his future. Then, the week before Easter, their builder vanished entirely and skipped town without paying them for a full month of backbreaking work. The brothers sat in Peter's cramped kitchen with empty wallets and a copy of the Herald Sun open to a story about a gang of bank robbers who had just been sentenced. Doug cracked 2 tinnies and slid one across the Formica table. They sat in silence for a while, drinking warm beer, staring at the newsprint. Then Doug laughed that dry, dark laugh that meant he was thinking something dangerous.
Remember when Dad took us to the post office in Mo? You were outside. I stayed in the car. You fell asleep standing up.
Peter grinned despite himself.
I was 9. It was after midnight. Dad was furious. Said you'd get us all caught.
Doug took a long pull from his beer.
But you didn't. You never did. You never did. You never did.
Peter studied his brother across the table. The same face, the same tired eyes, the same calloused hands worn down by years of swinging hammers for men who never paid on time.
We could do that,
Peter said softly, tapping the headline with one rough finger.
We could do better. We have something no one else has.
Doug didn't need the sentence finished. Identical twins. 2 people, 1 face. If both committed robberies and neither talked, Every witness identification would dissolve into reasonable doubt. One twin could alibi the other from the opposite end of the state. A witness swearing Peter robbed a bank in Ballarat could be countered by another insisting Doug was buying groceries in Geelong at the exact same moment. It was, in theory, the perfect crime, not because it was clever, but because it exploited a crack in the system no one had ever bothered to seal. That toast would haunt them within 2 years. But there, in that shabby kitchen with rain hammering the windows, the Morgan twins felt untouchable. Holy Thursday, 1977. Dusk settles over the quiet suburb of Mernda, northeast of Melbourne. Peter pulls a nylon stocking over his face and steps into a tabby betting agency. The fluorescent lights buzz overhead. A lone manager stands behind the counter, counting the day's take before the holiday weekend. Peter levels a .22 rifle at the man's chest and demands the till. The manager's hands shake as he stuffs $320 into a paper bag. Peter eyes the safe in the corner and orders it opened, but the manager straightens his spine and starts lecturing.
Don't do this, son. Don't throw your life away for a few $100.
And the lecture unnerves Peter more than any gun could unnerve the manager. He snatches the bag and bolts into the rainy night. 2 miles down a muddy back road, Doug waits in a second car, engine idling. Peter emerges from the darkness and slides into the passenger seat, soaked with rain and nervous sweat. They dump the stolen vehicle in a paddock, hide the cash in an old toolbox beneath Peter's bed, and wait. Doug counts the crumpled bills and smirks at his brother.
You're not much of a robber, are you?
$320, a week's wages for a job that carried a decade in prison. Peter expected sirens within hours, detectives at his door by morning. Instead, days passed. No sketch appeared in the Herald Sun. No midnight knock rattled his door. The Mernda robbery never even made the local news, just another unremarkable stick-up in a state full of petty crime. That silence was worth more than the money. It proved the system worked exactly as they had theorized. 2 nobodies had knocked over a betting agency and vanished without a trace, without a single lead pointing back to them. If they could do it once, they could do it 100 times. Peter looked at Doug, and Doug looked back, and neither had to speak. The Morgan twins were just getting started, but could the same face that protected them also become the evidence that condemned them? And what happens to a perfect partnership when one twin decides he no longer needs the other? For 6 months, the robberies multiply across Victoria. Tab after tab, always at dusk, always the same red mustache, always the same calm voice, and always impossibly the robber vanishes before police can arrive. Detective Patrick Breer stands in his office at Russell Street headquarters, staring at a wall covered in witness statements. Every description is identical. Height, 5'11". Build, stocky. Hair, brown. Distinguishing feature, bushy red mustache. Voice, calm, almost apologetic. But the timeline makes no sense. On June 14th, witnesses placed the After Dark Bandit at a tab in Dandenong at 6:05 p.m. 40 minutes later, he hits another betting shop in Frankston, a route that takes police nearly an hour to drive, even with sirens wailing. They run every theory: accomplices in matching disguises, an elaborate relay system with multiple getaway cars, a criminal with access to a private airstrip. Nothing fits. The Phantom robs alone. He speaks to witnesses. He leaves fingerprints on counters and door frames. And somehow, impossibly, he occupies 2 points in space within windows of time that physics won't allow. Then came August 1978, the double job in Dramana and Sorrento. 30 minutes, 15 miles, same man. The math collapses entirely. At the Sorrento scene, The shaken cashier repeats the robber's parting words. "Sorry I'm late, but I just held up the Dramana branch." Breer writes it in his notebook. It reads like a taunt, like the Phantom knows he's untouchable. Victoria Police launches Operation Rimfire. 50 officers stake out betting shops and rural banks every evening from 5 o'clock until 7:30. They crouch in hedgerows with radios switched off, holding their bladders for hours. The newspapers christen him the After Dark Bandit. The public treats him like a folk hero. The cops treat him like a ghost. For 23 months, the Phantom stays ahead. Every lineup fails. Every sketch looks the same. Breer stops sleeping properly. The case becomes an obsession. One man cannot be in two places at once, but this man is. The twins, meanwhile, are perfecting their craft. Peter's innovation, the double job, transforms petty crime into legend. They strike only at dusk, using the dying light as cover for approach and the rising darkness for escape. They map police patrol schedules weeks in advance, noting which constable drove which route and when he stopped for coffee. After each robbery, they vanish on foot or bicycle through trails no squad car can follow, sometimes trekking 15 miles cross-country through dense scrub to bypass roadblocks entirely. The twins graduated from tabby agencies to real banks. In March 1978, Peter walked into the State Savings Bank in Mirbeau North with a sawed-off shotgun tucked under his coat. He wore a grotesque rubber mask molded to look like an elderly man's sagging face. The tellers froze as he vaulted the counter, emptied their drawers into a canvas bag, and escaped on a stolen motorbike into the forest. When he stopped to count his haul beneath a gum tree, he found a surprise at the bottom of the bag, a .25 caliber Browning pistol that a bank employee had slipped in, perhaps hoping the weapon would lead police to him. Peter pocketed the gun as a trophy. The cash totaled $15,000 more money than he had earned in a year of carpentry. But success breeds arrogance, and arrogance breeds friction. What happens when one twin decides he doesn't need the other anymore? And that Browning pistol Peter pocketed as a trophy. It would later misfire at the worst possible moment, and that malfunction would end everything. Peter bought fast cars and bragged about breaking into the racehorse business. He envisioned himself as the big guy in domestic horses in Victoria. Robbery merely a shortcut to the respectability he craved. But the partnership was fraying. Doug skipped planning sessions for football practice. He bailed on heists to spend evenings with his girlfriend. Peter started calling his twin parasite behind his back, then to his face. Doug heard every insult. He knew Peter considered him dead weight, a hanger-on coasting on his brother's nerve. The contempt burned, and Doug decided to prove his worth the only way the Morgan family understood. He started freelancing, pulling jobs alone. That decision changed everything. One night in late 1978, Doug hit a small-town tab solo. The manager resisted. Doug panicked and fired his shotgun. A stray pellet struck a bystander in the lip of a young man who had walked in to place a bet at the wrong moment. The wound bled across the linoleum floor. No one died, but blood changed the equation entirely. The newspapers ran screaming headlines, calling the After Dark Bandit a potential killer. Police doubled their resources and their resolve. At the rendezvous that night, Peter was waiting. When Doug told him what happened, Peter's face went white, then red. He raised his rifle at Doug's chest, finger on the trigger. For a long, terrible moment, neither brother moved. The bush around them was silent, except for insects. Then Peter lowered the barrel. They never spoke of that moment again. They didn't have to. Both knew what it meant. The trust between them was now ash. Doug, fed up with Peter's contempt and shaken by the near execution, decided to strike back where it would hurt most. A few weeks later, at a race meet in Flemington, Doug slipped away from the crowd and located Peter's prized getaway car, a fast sedan they used for escapes. He broke in, found the keys, and drove off. In the trunk sat their shared arsenal, rifles, the Browning pistol, and $40,000 in cash. Doug left a handwritten note on the empty parking space. "Thanks, bro." Peter spent 3 days hunting his twin across Victoria like a wounded animal tracking its own blood. He barged into motel after motel, waving Doug's photograph at startled desk clerks, ready to kill if he found him. Doug stayed one step ahead by hiding in the last place Peter would think to look, a motel directly beside a police station in a suburb south of Melbourne. On the 4th day, Doug called to negotiate. He claims he returned half the money in a briefcase exchange. Peter insists the briefcase was empty. The truth died somewhere between their competing stories. Either way, they agreed to continue the partnership. Neither wanted to face the police alone, and neither could replicate the twin advantage solo. But the brotherhood was poisoned beyond any hope of repair. Doug made a private vow, one last score, then out for good. In October 1978, he robbed a bank in the mountain town of Warburton entirely alone and escaped with $39,000, their biggest single haul ever. He sat under a gum tree afterward, listening to police helicopters crisscross the valley, and felt no thrill. Only exhaustion. Only the desire to stop. That night, Doug Morgan told himself he was finished with crime forever. Peter scoffed when he heard the number. Beginner's luck, he called it. But beneath the mockery, he refused to accept that his brother was walking away. Peter was not even close to finishing. In fact, he was planning a job so reckless, so arrogant, that it would bring 200 officers crashing down on both of them. And it would test the only rule the Morgan brothers still followed. If one gets caught, the other stays silent for 12 hours to allow an escape. What kind of arrogance drives a man to rob the same bank 3 times? And what happens when the police finally catch up to a man who believes he cannot be caught? By early 1979, Peter Morgan's confidence had curdled into dangerous hubris. He began returning to targets he had already hit, walking back into banks he had robbed months earlier, as if daring the police to stop him. In March, he strolled into the Heathcote branch of the commercial banking company for the 2nd time, wearing the rubber old man mask and greeting the terrified staff with a grin they could hear in his voice.
Hello, remember me?
They did. He had cleaned them out 6 months earlier. Same mask, same shotgun, same calm voice. Now he was back, and he stole the same getaway car, an orange Datsun belonging to a teller named Margaret. Doug told Peter he was insane. Hitting the same bank twice was reckless. A 3rd time, suicide. Peter waved him off. He needed a few more scores to buy racehorses, build his reputation, and become the gentleman farmer of his fantasies. Doug wanted no part of it. He was finished with the business for good. April 27th, 1979. Peter decides to rob the Heathcote CBC for the 3rd time. He spends hours watching the branch from a parked car, timing the lone police cruiser passing every 30 minutes. At 4:30 p.m., with the autumn sun low and golden, he pulls on a rubber mask, tucks a Browning into his waistband, and walks toward the front door with a shotgun hidden beneath his jacket. Then, the pattern breaks. Senior Constable Ray Koch, the officer Peter had been timing, arrives 10 minutes early. The blue squad car rolls into the lot, catching Peter exposed. For a frozen second, robber and cop lock eyes through the windshield. Peter ducks behind a tree, rips off the mask, shoves it under his jumper, and lets adrenaline decide. He steps out and raises the Browning. Coke leaps from the vehicle, but Peter is faster. They grapple in the parking lot. The gun fires twice, bullets tearing into Coke's hip and abdomen. The officer collapses onto the asphalt, bleeding but conscious. Peter drags the wounded constable toward the bank, leaving a smear of blood across the concrete. Pressing the pistol to Coke's ribs, he hisses,
I should finish you right now. You're the only person who's seen my face without the mask. But I won't.
He shoves Coke through the glass doors, where tellers stand frozen, and barks orders.
Fill the bag. Open the safe.
Within minutes, he has $11,000. Margaret silently hands over her car keys again. Peter takes them without a word and exits through the back. He abandons the Datsun on a dirt road and rides a hidden black Yamaha dirt bike into the bush as sirens wail. Within an hour, 200 officers flood the district. Helicopters sweep the forests. Tracking dogs follow scent trails that dead end at creeks. Roadblocks seal every road for 50 kilometers. But Peter is gone, threading dirt trails through dense bushland, crossing streams to break his scent. The rendezvous point is a tiny Catholic church outside Axedale. Doug is supposed to be waiting with a car, the pact simple. If one gets caught, the other stays silent for 12 hours to allow an escape. Peter arrives just before midnight. The steps are empty. He sits in the darkness, listening. 1 hour passes. 2. At 2 a.m., he hears an engine. Hope flares. Headlights sweep the ridge half a mile away. He steps off the church steps to wave Doug down. The car turns and disappears. At 4 a.m., another vehicle. Same story. Headlights crest the rise, slow, and vanish. Dawn breaks gray and cold. Peter hasn't moved in hours. Birds call, tractors start, normal people living normal lives, while he sits on cold stone waiting for a brother who isn't coming. 60 miles north, Doug hears the radio bulletin. Officer shot in Heathcote. Massive manhunt underway. Armed suspect on motorcycle. His hands turn white on the wheel. Peter shot a cop. This is no longer robbery, it's attempted murder. Every road will be crawling with police looking for one face, a face Doug also wears. He keeps driving anyway, hours late, for Peter, for the pact, for whatever remains of the brotherhood toasted 2 years ago. Cresting a hill south of Axedale at dawn, he sees 3 police cars blocking the road, rifles trained, every vehicle checked. 1 more mile and he would reach the church. 1 more mile and he'd be arrested for a shooting he didn't commit. He turns the car around. At 10:15 a.m., after more than 10 hours on cold stone steps, Peter accepts the truth. Doug is not coming. The pact is broken. The brotherhood is dead. Cold, hungry, and desperate, he abandons the church, flags a passing car, and hitchhikes to Bendigo. Peter is 10 minutes from the train station, 10 minutes from freedom. But a young constable's gut feeling is about to end everything. The same face that made them untouchable would become the photograph that condemned them both. The next morning, Peter Morgan is bone-weary and almost free. He dumps his muddy clothes and shotgun in a public rubbish bin, washes his face in a service station bathroom, and buys a cheap blue suitcase to look like an ordinary traveler. The Bendigo train station is 10 minutes away, 10 minutes from escape. Constable Rick Hasty, a young officer on routine patrol, spots a red-mustached man walking too quickly down a side street. Something about his stride, the way his eyes flick toward passing cars, draws suspicion. Hasty follows, then calls out. The man stops. Hasty asks to see inside the bag. Peter keeps his voice calm, just a traveler. Hasty opens the latches and finds a sawed-off shotgun, bundles of cash, and a grotesque rubber mask. His eyes go wide. Peter lunges, shoving the Browning into Hasty's gut and pulling the trigger. They freeze for a heartbeat, then explode into a desperate brawl on the concrete. The gun clicks dry. Hasty, young and fit, wrestles the pistol free and slams Peter against a brick wall, forearm across his throat.
You've got me.
Peter pants, the fight draining out of him.
I just made you a hero.
After 23 months of impossible escapes, the After Dark Bandit is in custody. He evaded 200 officers, helicopters, and tracking dogs, but not a young constable's intuition and a faulty firing pin. At the Bendigo police station, Detective Patrick Breer drives down from Melbourne. He has hunted this phantom for 2 years, watched Operation Rimfire burn through budgets and manpower, stared at witness statements that made no sense. Now, the ghost has a face. They process Peter. Fingerprints, photographs, mugshot. Then, a call. Officers executing a search warrant at a farm outside Melbourne, registered to a Peter Morgan. Breer drives out personally. The farmhouse is modest, cluttered with tools and racing forms. In a drawer, his partner finds a photograph. 2 men at a restaurant table, shoulder to shoulder, grinning. Same red mustache, same face, exactly the same face. Breer stares. Everything clicks. Christ, he mutters. There's 2 of them. Back at the station, Breer slides the photo across the interview table. Peter studies it. His brother's face stares back, the face that made them untouchable, the face that abandoned him on the church steps. Breer expects denials, lawyers, silence. Instead, Peter talks. He confesses to 23 armed robberies, naming Doug as his partner in every one. The brothers had a pact. If one gets caught, the other stays silent for 12 hours to allow escape. Peter does not give Doug 12 seconds. Doug watches the betrayal on the evening news, his own face filling screens across the country. He runs, hopping between motels for 3 days. On a beach in Frankston, pacing the sand, 2 officers approach. He bolts directly into a patrol car. Both brothers are in custody. The After Dark Bandit, in both forms, will rob no more. Justice comes swiftly. Both receive roughly 20-year sentences, the longest for armed robbery in Victorian history. Peter serves 12 years in Pentridge Prison, Doug 11, in separate wings with no contact. They walk out in the early 1990s into a world that has largely forgotten them. They do not reconcile. No reunion, no apology. To this day, Peter and Doug maintain a bitter rivalry over who was the real After Dark Bandit and who redeemed himself. They do not speak. Neither knows where the other lives. The identical face that once made them invincible becomes the photograph that condemned them. The bond that shielded them from every detective cannot shield them from the resentments they nursed. In the end, the only people capable of catching the Morgan twins were the Morgan twins themselves. Their father taught them anything was acceptable as long as no one got hurt, but he never mentioned what happens when the person you hurt most wears your own face in the mirror. If you want to see another case where a criminal's greatest advantage became their fatal flaw, watch my video on the man who found the perfect hiding place until the very thing protecting him transformed into the trap that caught him.